Clinton campaign-backed Russia collusion conspiracy madness. Headline up on the Daily Mail. Ex-director of national intelligence claims Biden and Obama knew about Hillary campaign plot to hack Trump's servers. Enough evidence, this was a quote, in Durham's probe, Russia probe, to indict multiple people. What did they know? When did they know it? We're now joined by somebody who knows all about this situation. He lived it. He fought through it. Former President Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., is with us now. Good to have you, sir. Thanks for being on the program.
It's great to be with you guys. How are you?
We're good, Don, but you got to tell us, man, what's it feel like to see this stuff coming out now? It would have been helpful for us to know this a while ago, obviously, but it feels like we're just beginning to get somewhere near the full truth.
Well, listen, you're right. I lived it. I did 30 hours of testimony about something that they literally manufactured themselves. Where's the inspector general? Is every government contractor allowed to weaponize data? Are they allowed to spy on the president of the United States of America? I mean, it's just like serious stuff. And I'm curious, Clay, like where is the, it's worse than Watergate crowd? I figured they'd wheel Bob Woodward out from under the rock that he's been hiding because every tweet my father sent was worse than Watergate. This actually is. I mean, they legitimately spied on the president of the United States. And, now Jake Sullivan, someone who's in the Biden administration, presumably negotiating with Russia, seems to at least be involved or at least have intimate knowledge, created the whole boogeyman Russia thing, is now negotiating with Russia to try to prevent us from getting into war in the Ukraine. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This is insanity. And it's truly scary. I wish it would have come out earlier. We all knew it was nonsense, at least those with a brain. But, that didn't go well for the swamp. It didn't go well for the Democrats and their lackeys in the media. And so they kept pushing Russia collusion as though it was real. But, I guess it was real. It just was with the Democrats and with Hillary Clinton and with people within the Biden and Obama administrations. And because of that, no one's going to cover anything.
It's wild, too, to look at. I mean, when I saw this come out, Fox News obviously did a great job of covering it. And you tweeted about it, shared it. It ricocheted around, obviously, in the universe of people who follow me. But Don, I mean, when you look at what's going on here with the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, they're totally pretending this doesn't exist at all, despite the fact that these are pretty serious allegations being brought by the government investigator Durham himself. I mean, are you even yourself a little bit surprised that this story is still not getting attention, even when it's not coming from you or your dad or people who are in the political realm necessarily? This is theoretically an independent political investigation, an independent counsel that is putting forth amazingly detailed allegations of, and I don't think you're exaggerating at all, things that are as bad or worse than what Richard Nixon was accused of during Watergate.
I'm not surprised at all because I've been watching. I mean, I've seen them do it. Yesterday, big story on CNN was, Joe Rogan and his use, even though he was quoting someone else, of the N-word is literally, it's like it's 9/11. It's January 6th. It's another January 6th, and January 6th was worse than 9/11 and Pearl Harbor, as we've been told, and the list goes on and on. It's all garbage. But it doesn't matter because there's been no consequence to these guys pushing it other than, CNN's ratings are down 80%. That shouldn't surprise you because they've been propagandists, but the New York Times is no better. They're no different. They're not going to talk about it. Hell, it seems like they may have known. They were certainly involved in pushing the disinformation. The people that were creating the fictitious Russia narrative went specifically to the New York Times because they knew they would be friendly to their cause. Their cause was to hurt Donald Trump. It was to hurt anyone Republican, probably beyond that, but especially Trump because he was a real threat to the swamp on both sides. And so, to me, they're complicit in all of this. You see that day in and day out.
What does it feel like to see Hunter Biden actually do all the things that people said you did?
Oh, I mean, And it's totally fine. I mean, no, he's a very accomplished artist. Of course, we don't need to know the names of the
$500,000 people are paying for his paintings. Can you imagine if you had tried to go out and sell paintings for $500,000?
I should still do it. If I made $2, they'd lose their minds. Hunter Biden, who had no experience any of these things, seems to be linked in all of these countries. By the way, the story that no one seems to be talking about is, given all of the shady connections to Ukraine with Hunter and the no-show jobs and the millions of dollars and this, that, like, do you think that maybe the decision makers, whether it's Joe Biden, if he's capable of even making a decision at this point, or anyone else in that administration, do you think that they could be perhaps biased or making bad decisions for America because someone else has more information about the shady stuff that was going on? I know that if it was me, they'd be at least asking the question. No one even seems to be talking about it. I mean, there's moments where we're at the verge of World War III. The president of the Ukraine is telling America to calm down. It's not as bad as you're making it. You have guys that created the Russia boogeyman negotiating on behalf of the United States against Putin. I'm sure he'll take that well. It's lunacy. And again, it should be a big story, and they're not even talking. It's not even like it's buried somewhere. It's just like they're just like closing their eyes and pretending it didn't happen. It's both despicable and not surprising.
Speaking of Donald Trump Jr., son of former President Trump, and Don, do you have any confidence that we're going to get these answers about the full extent of this? I mean, again, to the Fox News and Daily Mail reporting today, they say that John Ratcliffe told Special Counsel Durham there's enough evidence to indict multiple people connected to the origins of the Trump-Russia probe. The former DNI met with Durham more than once. He pointed Durham to a declassified CIA memo of Clinton approving looking into Trump's Russia ties as a way of distracting from her email scandal. And then, of course, the report was sent directly to then FBI Director Comey and Deputy Assistant Director of Counterintelligence Strzok. We know how they feel about your dad and about Republicans and, the rule of law. But do you think that we actually get these answers? Do you think that Durham is going to be enough? Or do you have a plan in mind? Let's say, I don't know, if someone is president again, to get to the answers.
Well, listen, I hope it starts sooner than that. I hope, if the Republicans have learned anything about the way the game is played and the way we need to be playing it, which they have not historically done, I hope if and when we take back over the House, there are, subpoenas are flying on day one. I hope they call in these people, Jake Sullivan, on moment number one, instant number one. We got to play the game the way the Democrats would be playing it. I'm not confident that anything happens unless we start doing that, because I've just been too close to it. I've seen the nonsense go on for too long. The swamp's going to protect the swamp, even people on the other side. The Republicans have generally been too weak to actually do anything because they don't want to ruffle a feather, and they want to be able to, leak something to the New York Times so that, they get a story that's a 4 instead of a 3 out of them the next time they do their hit piece on them. We've just played the game so poorly. They're so bad at it. They're so weak for the most part, the establishment guys, that, I don't have much faith that it doesn't happen. And I think maybe the American voter has to make it an issue, certainly going into midterms, that they want the answers. And hopefully, finally, people will start listening to their constituents, because I see it when I'm out there. They want it, but very few people have any hope that anything actually happens.
Don, two more for you.
Actually gets done.
Two more for you. One I know you're going to answer, and the other one, well, I have to ask. How do you think we're doing going into this midterm election, and where's your dad's head on whether he's going to run again?
Well, listen, I think we're doing great if you just look at the record, right? It doesn't take a genius. Hey, if I'm pissed off when I'm filling up my truck at the pump, I imagine the average American, who it hurts them probably a lot more than me, is feeling it. We know we've been lied to about everything. Joe Biden was going to fix it. He was going to solve COVID. There's no hypocrisy with the mask mandates. We'll smother our children, but you saw it. Every celebrity, I think you put it out on Twitter yesterday, every celebrity at the Super Bowl is running around maskless, and they're having a good old time. But no, we gotta listen to the teachers' unions and make sure. You saw the disastrous withdrawal out of Afghanistan, just the sheer incompetence. Like, even the Republicans would have to try hard to screw this up. But again, I don't ever take the win sort of before there's a win, because, again, I do think, historically speaking, our superpower has been, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory as a party. And so, hopefully we change that. God knows they've given us enough ammunition And again, I think it's sort of why you need a Donald Trump type in there. Now, I don't know that we have the bench yet, Clay, to say, there's a lot of guys that aren't going to cave under pressure. It's one thing when they pit people up against Donald Trump and they can make him into kind of a hero and protect him. It's another when all the arms, all the slings and arrows are trained on the one guy that's in charge. That's when, I don't know that we have enough of a bench, but I do see a lot of people kind of coming up, starting to understand how to play the game, starting to use the Democrats' playbook and do that. And once we do that as a party, we win. I mean, it's always amazing to me that elections are as close as they are, given that we're up against literally $1 trillion big tech enterprise that's functioning as a marketing arm of the other side. You have $1 trillion mainstream media arm. You have what they do to conservatives on social media. It's actually hard to believe it's even close, given the propaganda that's pushed on the other side and the smothering of our message. And yet it is, because our ideas are good and people are seeing it. It takes a disaster like Joe Biden. But it's not just Joe Biden. This is actually Democrat policies. These are the things that Democrats want to do, because I don't think anyone believes Joe Biden's actually doing this stuff. He's signing the stuff put in there by the Democrat Party. We have to hold them accountable. And again, you sort of have to hit rock bottom. And I think we've hit rock bottom as a country in terms of policy, in terms of decisions, in terms of what's going on, that maybe that wakes people up, that we have to start being in this game and playing the way the other side does.
I'm so fired up, as you mentioned, about the fact that all these celebrities aren't wearing masks. They're defying the LA mask mandate. I was out in LA all week. Nobody's asking for any sort of masks or any sort of vaccine passports or anything else to go to any of these big parties. If you're a parent, and I know you are a parent, and I bet your kids aren't having to wear masks, Don, just like mine aren't because of where we live. But if you're a parent who has to send your kids in wearing a mask after you watched the Super Bowl last night in L.A. and saw all the flouting of the masking rules that was going on, how furious are you, and how furious should you be? To me, this is what Republicans should be running on in 2022, is they weren't the party of science. Democrats were the party of control. And I think people, the moms, the dads, you see the school board meetings, people are just fed up with it.
Yeah, and that's what's so important. Regular people are stepping up. Now, they've been labeled as domestic terrorists for speaking up at a school board meeting because they didn't want their children getting indoctrinated into, communism and other nonsense. But that's how the other side has been. The rules are not for the elite. The rules are for the peasants, right? We don't have to follow the rules. That's ridiculous. You see all the pictures of servers at the elite parties. They're all masked with, the diaper on their face, and all the other people, they're laughing and hugging, and it's wonderful, and no one cares. I mean, they really think that we're stupid. They think that you're schmucks. It's very clear. So if you're not outraged, you should be. If you've seen what it's doing to children, developmentally, if you see what it does in terms of depression, all of those things, none of that matters. They can do whatever they want. It means nothing to them. And it's all been one big power grab. And sadly, I've watched for the last 2 years how many Americans were just so quick to give up that freedom that that's such a fundamental tenet of being an American, of our country.
Does feel like the Canadian truckers might be giving us something of an awakening here. Don Jr., everybody, Donald Trump Jr. Don, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it. Come back and hang again soon.
I'll do that, man. Thanks a lot.
The Canadian trucker showdown, the Freedom Convoy versus Justin Trudeau. We have somebody who really understands exactly what's going on with this, the political dynamics, the national level dynamics for Canada. Jordan Peterson is with us now. He is a clinical psychologist, author, podcaster, and we are very pleased that he's joining us. Jordan, thank you so much for calling in.
Thanks for the invitation.
What do you see happening right now, Jordan? What does this mean when the Trudeau regime invokes the Emergencies Act because of the trucker convoy in Ottawa, and how do you see this playing out?
Well, even the Toronto Star today, the editorial board of the Toronto Star, which is a newspaper as close to a government mouthpiece as can possibly be imagined, came out and stated forthrightly today that this showed a complete breakdown of leadership, and that was a catastrophic error. So I think the net result will likely be the cessation of the Trudeau government. That's my guess. I've talked to the truckers to some degree this morning, and nothing has really changed on the ground for them in Ottawa. There's no evidence of more intense enforcement of the hypothetical laws that now govern Canada. So I think that our Prime Minister, in his juvenile manner, has made a fatal error.
Jordan, I appreciate you coming on with us. I'm curious what you feel, because you travel quite a lot. And historically, Americans would think of Canada as being a more laid-back, easygoing version of America, right? Where everybody's pretty compatible. And this idea of the division that we are seeing right now is frankly kind of staggering. For you as a Canadian, is it also kind of crazy to you, because I know you've been back and forth to the United States more, to see the United States as a more normal, easygoing country? I mean, even New York and California, which are very restrictive, seem pretty open, I would imagine, to Canadians. What's going on? How did Canada get here?
Well, the Canadian founding principles are peace, order, and good government, say, rather than right to life, liberty, and happiness. And so our country has always been predicated on a kind of moderate stability. And for decades, for generations, it was perfectly reasonable for Canadians to be trusting of their fundamental institutions, educational institutions, media institutions, provincial government, municipal government, federal government. Everything was reliable and worked moderately to extremely well. And so Canadians could be justified in their trust of all those systems. And a lot of that has been turned on its head in the last few years to a degree that, well, it's almost unimaginable, especially perhaps as a consequence of media collusion with the government and the inability of ordinary people to obtain accurate information from once reliable news sources. I think everyone in Canada is in utter shock at all of this. And Canadians are being called upon to make a decision, which is either their fundamental governing institutions have become, in some sense, frighteningly unreliable, or there's something wrong with the truckers. And it's easy for many Canadians to believe the latter. But unfortunately, the truth of the matter is that the former is true. Now, I'm hoping that peaceful heads and wisdom will prevail, and that this will be handled in a typically Canadian way, which is that through and things will return to something approximating normal. But yeah, it's unprecedented times in Canada. The degree of division in the country is higher, I would say, even than during the separatist crisis of the last few decades.
We're speaking to Jordan Peterson, author, podcaster, and psychologist. Many of you certainly familiar with his books and his work in the past. Jordan, do you think that there is a high probability that Trudeau at some point is going to just rely on the brute force of sending in law enforcement to remove these protesters, including violently? And do you think that they will go through with that?
Well, that's the real question. It isn't obvious to me that he actually has enough control to do that. The city of Ottawa tried to get the tow truckers to tow the rigs out of Ottawa. They all Trudeau said yesterday he could compel ordinary citizens, such people who drive tows, to comply with his now draconian legislation. But it isn't obvious to me that he understands who he's dealing with. The people who do that sort of job aren't easily pushed around. Seriously, they're not easily pushed around. And I'm accustomed to dealing with people who will bend a knee, let's say. It's to me at all that the police, the military, the tow truckers, the people who would have to put boots on the ground to stop this are going to be willing to use that kind of force. We'll see, but I don't think it's probable. And even if that does happen, the optics are going to be terrible, because the people in Ottawa, the truckers, are by and large decent, hardworking, committed citizens who've been pushed beyond their capacity to tolerate these invasive mandates, which have been described as illegal by one of the drafters of our Charter of Rights, the only living signatory to the Charter of Rights. It isn't obvious to me Trudeau has the upper hand. I do really believe the most likely outcome is that his government will fall.
That's what I wanted to follow up on, because you told us that, and I think the answer to our first question, we're talking with Jordan Peterson about the situation that is going on right now in Canada. You said that you think the most likely outcome is that Justin Trudeau's government is going to fall. what would that look like for Americans who are listening to you right now? What would that process look like, and how would it happen in the event that you are correct and Justin Trudeau's government does sort of fall?
Well, he would lose a vote of confidence in the Parliament. So right now, with the NDP, which is the Socialist Party in Canada, he has a majority of the representatives, let's say equivalent to the representatives in the American system, supporting his government, constituting his government. But if enough of the representatives that make up the Liberal Party and support him dispute his policies and turn away from his mandates, and that's starting to happen, then he'll lose a majority in the House and he'll have to call an election. He'll have to resign. The Governor General would call upon him to resign as a motion of non-confidence, and then he would have to call an election.
Jordan, what is your message?
The consequence of that was his leadership would be replaced.
Jordan, what is your message to the truckers right now?
Keep your heads. Keep your heads, gents. Don't take the bait. Don't take the provocation. Work out an exit strategy as carefully as you possibly can. Make your conditions for satisfaction clearly known. And above all, keep doing the peaceful things that you've been doing so remarkably. And hold that firmly in mind, that commitment firmly in mind.
Is there any way that Justin Trudeau gives in, Jordan? Because when you look right now at what's going on, for instance, in the United States, so many states are finally saying, hey, we're lifting mask requirements, we're lifting vaccine mandates. I think by the time Joe Biden speaks at the State of the Union on March 1st, he's going to basically have an entire country that is demanding a return to normalcy, and we're seeing that, obviously. Is there any way Justin Trudeau argues, hey, the science has changed, I'm going to change the requirements that exist in Canada, and try to claim it's the science changing, not the pressure from the truckers? Is there a way out, in other words, for Trudeau other than violently potentially removing these truckers from where they are protesting?
Well, many of the provinces in Canada, so the equivalent of American states, have already announced the sequential cessation of the vaccine, and that's all happened within the last week. And there's a direct consequence of the protests and pressure and the change in conservative leadership at the federal level, because that party dispensed with its previous, as a consequence, I would say, of these protests. So the provinces, many of the provinces, have started to back mandates, especially the ones who are run by more conservative politicians. Pretty good sign. And the provinces in Canada have a lot of power, and I suspect more of them will shift in that direction in the next couple of days, or certainly in the next weeks. Harder and harder for Trudeau to take a moderate. I suspect he still could, although it isn't obvious that he can do it and still retain any credibility. It would be the best pathway forward, but my observations indicate that he's more than prepared to double down. I've never been an admirer of Trudeau. I think he offers through false pretenses, meaning that he had a well-known family name because his father was the prime minister for many years, and he has this reputation in Canada that the Kennedys and the Bushes do in the United States. But he had none of the training or education or, I would say, competence or perhaps intelligence and wisdom necessary to do a job as difficult as being prime minister. And yet he was perfectly willing to adopt the role. And I think we're seeing that playing out in his policy decisions. He's a juvenile person in my estimation, and I'm not saying that lightly. I've watched him and certainly his actions over the last 3 weeks have been, no matter how badly you think he could have managed it, he managed to manage it worse. And I'm not saying that with any degree of triumph. I think it's a catastrophe for the country.
Jordan Peterson, thank you so much for joining us here. If you haven't already, check out Jordan's 12 Rules for Life or Beyond Order, any of his fantastic books and his podcast. Jordan, thank you for making the time.
Yeah, well, thanks very much for the invitation, and thank you to all of you who are listening.
That is Jordan Peterson. We've got Senator Hagerty on with us right now. And Senator, I know we got a lot to get into with you, but have you been following the Canadian trucker protest and the truly extraordinary powers that now Justin Trudeau has taken in terms of being able to monitor who's donating money, where that money is coming from. I mean, for Americans out there, this is a truly draconian dictatorial action that the Canadian Prime Minister has undertaken here.
It is very draconian, and I think it's a preview of where these big government Democrats want to go. This is socialist policy on steroids up there, and it moves from big government essentially to big brother. That's what we're seeing manifesting itself in Canada. I think that's the instinct of the people in the Biden administration right now as well, to move to crush opposition and to use the massive powers of government to do it. Again, it's manifesting itself in Canada under Justin Trudeau, but we've heard Biden say himself that Trudeau ought to crush these truckers, and that's so counter to the liberty and freedom and everything that our nation stands for.
Hey, Senator Hagerty, it's Buck. I'm just wondering if you think, based on what you're seeing now, we've been talking to people about how much support the Canadian truckers have, and obviously in this country, a lot of people see it as a real movement for not just freedom, but also normalcy. Are you getting the sense that some of your Senate Democrat colleagues and just Democrats who are going to be up in this cycle in general are worried that they overplayed their tyrannical hand with the COVID mandates and maybe paying a price, or you think they believe they've handled it just right?
Buck, I've got to believe they're thinking hard about this now. There may have been a lot of inside the beltway, breathing your own exhaust going on up until the Virginia election. But after they saw the voters manifest their perspective and send Terry McAuliffe packing, after they brought national Democrats in and really tried to make it about their national issues, I think they're beginning to realize that the American public doesn't want this big-handed government approach. And the Canadian situation is just underscoring that even further. But it's all part of the same theme. Americans have had it with big government. We want our liberty back. We want our freedom back. And if they're too deaf to miss that, they're going to be out of office come November.
Senator Hagerty, also want to ask you about what's going on in with China right now, the Olympics, and whether you think that, how is the Biden administration handling all this? What do you think about the fact we're even having an Olympics in China? It feels like not a lot of people are watching it, so...
Well, Clay, I've encouraged people not to watch it. The Biden administration went through with a, quote, diplomatic boycott of the Olympics, but I've pushed them to do far more. I used to be the U.S. ambassador to Japan. I did a lot of work preparing for the 2020 Olympics with my team there. And what we did was press the pause button. We paused those Olympics for a year, and the Summer Olympics are much larger than these Winter Olympics. We should have hit the pause button on this one. Again, the International Olympic Committee should have never awarded it to Beijing, but we had the opportunity to press the International Olympic Committee and get them to move these Olympics to another venue. I feel for the athletes. I know that they've worked hard for this, but just like they did in the 2020 Olympics, if they could wait another year and practice, they would be going to a much safer venue, and they would deny the communist government of China the opportunity to propagandize what is supposed to be a celebration of the human spirit. What we've done is we've allowed the CCP to use this as a massive propaganda tool.
Senator Hagerty, what do you think is going to happen in Ukraine based on the briefings that you have seen? And tying it in with China, how much do you think of what Russia is doing is being watched by China, given they've already taken over Hong Kong effectively and ended democracy there? How much of a serious threat do you think China poses right now in the immediate future to Taiwan, based partly on what might happen in Ukraine?
Well, I think China and the CCP are watching Ukraine very, very closely, as you intimated. And they're going to watch our response to it more than ever, because this is predictive for them of what we might do, how we might respond if they move further on Taiwan. I think you've got to back this up to the very beginning of the Biden administration, though, to understand the face cards that have been dealt to Vladimir Putin since Biden came into office. The first thing that Biden does is come into office, kill the Keystone XL pipeline, stop fracking, and basically wage war on the oil and gas industry. That's had the effect of driving energy prices through the roof. The number 2 producer of energy in the world is Russia. That windfall has gone straight to Vladimir Putin. We're probably funding all of this malign activity right now. If you look at Putin's direct engagements with us, the START treaty extension that Biden gave him, President Trump was trying to hold back on this nuclear weapons negotiation to get Russia to include a lot more in it. Biden came in with no conditions, gave him a 5-year extension. Then the next thing we see is Russian hackers come and hit the Colonial Pipeline. Instead of having real penalties for doing this, Again, Russian hackers hit our infrastructure here in America, our energy infrastructure. Joe Biden's response was to present a list of 16 industries and wag his finger and tell Vladimir Putin he shouldn't touch those. Well, I'm sure that Vladimir Putin looked at that list and thought, boy, I didn't even see number 13 there. Maybe we should hit that one too. It was just like a laundry list or a shopping list for him. And what does it say about the other industries in our nation? And then finally with Nord Stream 2, we had congressionally mandated sanctions on what will be a huge geopolitical weapon that Russia will use to control the flow of energy into Europe. We had that stopped, and Biden waived it. So as Putin sees all of these face cards dealt this way, then he sees incompetence. Look at our southern border. Biden has allowed that to collapse. Look at what happened in Afghanistan, an embarrassment of proportions we've never seen in our lifetimes. And look at crime here in America. What Putin is seeing is weakness at every turn. This is the opportunity of a lifetime to do just the type of thing he's doing right now. And other adversaries like China, as you mentioned, are looking at this very, very closely.
Senator, the Durham report is eventually going to come out in a larger context. We have the independent counsel investigation that is going on. How significant are the allegations against Hillary Clinton's campaign and what they might have done to both Donald Trump's campaign and when he was president? And if the Senate flips back to Republican hands and the same thing in the House, should there be investigations particularly focused on what Hillary Clinton's campaign did in order to allegedly spy on Trump's? Because right now, obviously, many in the media are pretending this story doesn't exist. I'm curious what should happen on Capitol Hill in your mind based on the revelations we got Friday.
Well, step one is Durham needs to continue this probe. Step two, we need to retake the House and the Senate because you're talking about exactly what is going to happen. There needs to be massive oversight. This doesn't just have echoes of Watergate. It's much greater concern. We're talking about Hillary Clinton spying on the White House itself, one of the most secure complexes in the world. I mean, if our adversaries see that she was able to get away with this, what does it say about America? It's a direct attack on our democracy. And the liberal media refusing to cover it, this is just unbelievable. And when the GOP retakes the majority in 2022, there will be answers to this. We will not tolerate this.
Senator Hagerty, I appreciate the time. We'll see you again soon, and I appreciate you fighting the battles you are every single day.
Clay, thank you so much. Great to be on with both you and Buck.
Thanks, Senator.
That is Senator Hagerty out of Tennessee. We are joined now by Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio. Congressman, we're going to be down at Mar-a-Lago 1 week from today, and I bet we're going to be talking with Donald Trump some about this revelations that are coming out in the Durham probe. You've been on top of this for a long time, Congressman, and for everybody out there who has said Russia collusion is a lie, calling Adam Schiff on all of his BS. What was your reaction to the news that came out on Friday? And thanks for making time with us by the way.
You bet. Good to be with you. No, it just confirmed what we all knew, that they were in fact spying on President Trump. Looks like now they were doing when Durham's filing mentions the executive office of the president. That's the new thing. Like, holy cow! Now, did that happen during the transition and they were spying on, or did it happen when he was president? It sure seems like it most likely took place while in fact he was president of the United States. We'll have to see. But I think when you view it all in context, in fact, Byron York's got a great piece out on this. You view it in context. Remember what they did. They first manufactured the dossier. They used the dossier as a basis to go to the FISA court to get a warrant to spy on his campaign, namely Carter Page. They lied to the court, because the Kleinsmith guy who's been indicted, they lied to the court about information to get that warrant to spy on his campaign. Byron York puts out something that pointed out something I'd forgotten. They used this lady with the alias Azra Turk as a spy to send over to bump into Papadopoulos. They sent, using it straight out of a spy movie, straight out of James Bond. They used the girl to go talk to Papadopoulos, and then now we find out, they were monitoring internet traffic and all trying to create, in the words of Durham, an inference and a narrative. Now, you know what we call that? We call that trying to frame somebody. And that is what is scariest of all, trying to frame the president elected to be the commander-in-chief of our country. That is what is most troubling about all this.
Congressman Jordan, it's Buck. Thanks for being with us as always.
You bet.
The Durham probe continues on here. Do we have any sense of next steps, expectations for what's coming? And ultimately, I mean, this is something that came up when I was talking to Clay earlier in the show. I don't believe that our system as it stands right now would bring charges against Hillary or any of the named known people involved in Russia collusion, no matter what is found. What do you think the next steps are going to be like here in the Durham probe? I know you're not a part of it, but from what you can see from the outside. And do you think that effectively Hillary Clinton would get a pass no matter what it actually finds with regard to whether she acted in some capacity as part of a criminal conspiracy because the Democrat Party just couldn't handle it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a short answer. Obviously, Durham is being deliberate. He's being, I think, very thorough and going through this step by step. I do find it hard to believe. If you go back to the Zussman indictment a few months back, I do find it hard to believe that Zussman hands the information, the thumb drive, to the chief counsel at the FBI, Jim Baker. So he hands it to him, but somehow Baker didn't know. I mean, so they have a relationship such that Zussman can walk into the chief counsel at the Federal Bureau of Investigation and hand him information, but somehow the chief counsel at the FBI doesn't know that Zussman is working for the Clinton campaign at the Perkins Coie law firm. I find that hard to believe. Now, we'll see. So is Jim Baker involved in this? I don't know, but I find it to believe know something. Just like I find it didn't know the dossier was BS. But he used it because I think Jim Comey wanted to go after President Trump. This is how the Democrats operate. They get information that they know is not true. It's like the DOJ. DOJ went out and the Biden administration went out and solicited the letter from the School Boards Association just so they would have the pretext to do what they wanted to do, which is namely go after moms and dads. Same model applied here with what the FBI did. So we'll see where it all shakes out. And you know, we didn't had any idea until this filing just how serious this whole spying operation was. But we're going to have to just wait and let Durham complete his investigation.
Jim, how important, and I think this is sliding a little bit under the radar, is it that AG Barr on his way out gave independent counsel status to Durham to allow him, without, in theory, political pressure being exerted upon him, the authority to pursue this investigation wherever it led? I think it kind of got buried in all the craziness that was going on as the administrations flipped over. But that looks like one of the most significant acts that Barr may have undertaken as Attorney General.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Clay, and I agree. Remember what Bill Barr said in 2019 when he said spying took place. There's a basis for my concern about that spying, and the Democrats all went crazy. Well, because he knew that, he saw this Azra Turk situation. He saw what was happening out there. I think that's why he did this and said Durham's got more work to do. We know there's stuff that went on there. You heard John Ratcliffe over the last couple of days say he declassified information, gave it to Durham, and frankly, when I talked with John, he said this doesn't surprise me. This is and John thinks there's more coming. So he's not allowed to talk about it, but. It was critical that Barr did what he did, and we're going to have to let Mr. Durham complete his investigation. Because the most important thing in the end, I mean, you want people who did wrong, you want them held accountable. I hear that every day from constituents in our district and in Ohio and all across the country. But the most important thing is the American people get the full story, that the American people get the truth and know exactly what was going on and just, frankly, how bad it is with these unelected people doing things to the person we elected, the person who put their name on a ballot and ran for the job and is supposed to make decisions. It's important we get the truth so that we don't have this baloney going on in the future.
We're speaking to Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio. Congressman, the Canadian trucker protest still going strong. We have Justin Trudeau up to our north declaring what is effectively a form of martial law. They call it the Emergencies Act. And now there's the possibility of civil disobedience against vaccine mandates that did not stop the spread. And as we're entering the post-respiratory virus season, it would feel like normalcy isn't that much of a big request. That's what the truckers are asking for.
Yeah.
What do you think the reaction is? I mean, and do you think there'll be political ramifications in this country if the Canadian government decides that they're going to break this protest with force?
I think the American people had it with these so-called experts running our lives, and starting with Fauci. Like I said, who never put his name on a ballot, not supposed to make the decision, is running America and so much and influencing, frankly, the world. So I think people have had it. You saw it start with some moms and dads in Virginia and led to Glenn Youngkin. You saw it with 12 jurors in Wisconsin say, we've had it with this. We're going to do this. We're going to follow due process and the truth. in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and that jury verdict, and you're seeing it now with truckers in Canada. People have had it with the elites telling us what to do, and then the rules they tell us we have to follow, they never do. And the other thing I take from this is, can you remember what the press said when President Trump simply walked across to St. John Church and said, we need to protect the church from being burnt down and have some order here. The press went crazy, but now they're applauding Justin Trudeau imposing the Emergency Act in Canada. That's only been done, I think, one other time in the history of the statute. This is how crazy the left is at covering for the liberal politicians who, again, impose the rules on the citizens but never seem to follow them themselves.
Jim, I know you watched the Super Bowl, at least part of it. The Bengals, obviously, in your home state, they're playing. And by the way, Joe Burrow, also a native Ohioan, had a heck of a run he's had. All of the elites, the celebrities, everybody who could afford the $5,000 tickets to the Super Bowl, none of them are wearing masks, right? They're flagrantly violating the existing rules. So I'm going to build on this, give you a chance to tee off there. But Washington, D.C. now is doing away with its vaccine mandate and with its mask mandate. I saw the White House say they're not going to follow Washington, D.C.'s rules. Have you guys gotten a report yet from Nancy Pelosi about what she's going to do in terms of the Capitol when it comes to masks? And what do you expect there?
No, she'll keep the rule. I mean, I assume she's going to keep the rule. But we all know it's all show. It's all just for politics. And frankly, most of us Republicans, the only time we wear it is when you can be fined, which is on the House floor. The rest of the time is like, this is ridiculous. But they've yet to go back to hearings. This is the other thing. So think about the Democrats have closed the Capitol, allowed proxy voting, they've kicked Republicans off committee. They won't let Republicans serve on a select committee. They're trying to end the filibuster, trying to end the Electoral College, trying to pack the court, trying to let non-citizens vote. But somehow Donald Trump and Republicans are a threat to democracy. And we learned over the weekend, by the way, they were also spying on President Trump out of the executive office of the president, and they accuse us of being a threat to democracy. And their big thing is, we're going to wear masks here. None of this stuff makes sense, the things they say and do, and that's why I think the American people have so had it. And I am hoping there is a big change coming this November in the midterm election.
Jim, I want to ask you this, Congressman Jordan, pardon me, although, we do.
No problem.
We do appreciate whatever, it feels like you're Jim to us. We appreciate it. But Congressman Jordan, this fall, what does victory look like, real victory for Republicans? And what I mean by that is, what will you be satisfied with as a number in the majority? How many seats switching?
Well, no, I'll be honest with you, but I'll just be satisfied with the majority, because right now what they're doing with redistricting, they're trying to do it to Ohio right now. What Mark Elias, the same guy who was at least involved in this spying operation as chief counsel for the Clinton campaign, what he is doing around the country, the suits they're bringing, things that are happening, left-wing state Supreme Courts and everything else, what they're doing on redistricting is going to make it tougher. I still think we can win, and we got to fight these things in court, these redistricting efforts, because it's only gerrymandering if Republicans draw the district. If Democrats draw the districts like they did in Manhattan and the whole state of New York, then somehow that's just fine. That's not gerrymandering when Democrats are in charge and they draw these ridiculous-looking things. So that's going to make the job tougher. I'll be satisfied with the majority, even if it's just one vote. I'm hoping it's going to be much bigger.
What, for people out there who don't know the difference, right? I feel as if people hear, hey, it makes a difference whether you're in control of the House or the Senate. But I think there are a lot of people out there that don't really understand what that means in terms of its practical impact. So for people out there right now, how much of a difference would you have in being able to hold the powerful accountable if right now Republicans were in charge of the House instead of Democrats? What would it mean for you?
Clay, it makes all the difference. It means that the House is a majoritarian institution. The majority runs everything. We don't get subpoena power. We have fewer members on committee. We can't call people in for depositions or transcribed interviews. We can't do squat. And you've got to have the votes. It's just the way that – now, the Senate's different because they get the filibuster rule, and it's the Senate that's –
Oh, no.
We can't get Dr. Fauci. I've been wanting Dr. Fauci back in front of the committee.
I think Fauci's hacking the phone lines.
Fauci might have gotten to him.
Enough of this, Congressman Jordan.
It might be Hillary's people. Who knows how much power they've got? They knew that he was about to go off on Fauci and maybe Hillary too, and boom, the cell phone's out.
Yeah, sorry, Congressman. Go ahead.
Yeah.
No. Well, I'm sorry I lost you there, but they have all the power, and if it's just the way the majority works. And I would love to bring Dr. Fauci back in, but we just can't, and the Democrats won't do it. So it makes all the difference.
Yeah, Congressman, if you get a chance with the doctor, not only point out all the lies, inconsistencies, and politicization, but maybe he could do the biggest radio show in the country at some point if he could fit it into his schedule.
Yeah,
just throw that his way, okay?
He told us he was too busy to come on, Congressman. I'm sure you'll love that. He's doing documentaries and he's doing random podcasts. He can't come on the biggest radio show in the country, but the offer's still out there if he can find the time.
Congressman Jordan, thanks as always. We really appreciate you joining us.
You bet. Thanks, guys.
We are joined now by Michele Tafoya, formerly of NBC Sports, who was on the sideline for the game between the Rams and the Bengals. It was a thrilling one. Michele, does it feel strange for me to say for you, formerly of NBC Sports, welcome in, and just let everybody hear, biggest radio show in the country. We're excited to have you. Let us know where you're headed.
Oh, gosh. Well, first of all, it is a little weird. Thanks for having me to be called former, because it was such a long stretch of my life that I've spent doing this. But you know what? I'm so excited. I am truly eager to get out and on with other parts of my life that are so important to me. Part of that is I joined Kendall Qualls' gubernatorial campaign in Minnesota. He's a Republican running for office. We don't agree on everything. I don't think I agree with anyone on everything.
Amen.
But you can find your differences, but find your commonalities and move forward. And that's who I'm supporting. So I'm going to help him win. And, doing a lot of other things. I'm speaking at CPAC next week, and just a lot of irons in the fire as we speak that are going to result in something fun, meaningful, and helps, guys, something's been tugging at my soul and my gut for several years now that it's time to give back. Life has given me a lot, and I've earned a lot of it, but life has given me great opportunities. I want to spend some time now leaving this place better than I found it.
Michele, it's Buck. I'm not a big pro sports follower.
Shame. I'm kidding.
So I can't speak to that much of it, but I do basically live 24/7 in the matrix of the news cycle, and there's been obviously a lot of sports stories, particularly in the last few years, I'd say, that have just become national level news, and I mean political sports stories, not who won the Super Bowl, but who's taking a knee, who's having who's putting their hoods up, their hoodies up on the floor of an NBA game, etc. And one thing I've learned from Clay, because he comes from the sports world, I come from the politics world, is that he says, and when he said this to me, I kind of looked skyward. I said, I don't even know how this is possible, but that the sports media may have gone further left and more woke than even the national political media. How did that happen? Like, why did this happen? And you've been in the game for a while. What caused this to occur?
I cannot tell you what caused it. I have some theories. Here's what I think, though. I'm not sure that's entirely true. I think that ESPN has definitely gone leftward and lurched quite a ways, and I think that they paid a price for that. And I think they are trying to take some sort of course correction and try to come back into the middle. But listen, the biggest issues in the last few years have been things like Black Lives Matter and George Floyd, and Black Lives Matter speaks to a lot of people of color. And you've got a lot of people of color playing in professional sports. So they rightly want to express themselves. And I think one of the mistakes that the NFL made was that when they first started kneeling, they told them to stop. Just let them do what they want to do and express themselves. Now, I know you're a private league, and I know you have rules, but I think that organically this thing would have figured itself out in some way, because you had best friends on teams that disagreed on the topic. And you would see one guy kneeling and his best friend standing next to him with a hand on his shoulder. I'm talking about Derek Carr, who would stand next to guys that were behind, were with Black Lives Matter. And they would kneel and he would stand with his hand on their shoulder. He still would listen to the anthem, have one hand on his heart, the other on his guy's shoulder. This thing would have handled itself and kind of resolved itself or moved on organically without the league taking a hard stance. And I think that just spurred it on even more.
Michele, I was out in L.A. for the week. I left before the game. You were on the sideline. We opened yesterday's show saying whatever your feelings are on COVID, to have in L.A. basically 70,000 people, including virtually every celebrity that they showed on the broadcast, not wearing a mask. To then the next morning have to wake up on Monday and send your kids into school with masks, is that incongruity noticeable to you? Did you think about it at all as you were on the sideline for the game?
Not during the game because my focus was elsewhere. But my brother went to the game and his wife. And he had been to a game at SoFi a few weeks back. He had to show his vaccination card in order to get in. This time did not have to show a vaccination card to get in. No one told him to put a mask on. He wasn't going to put one on anyway. I guess if they had, held a gun to his head, maybe. But, it is so rich with hypocrisy. And why our kids are the last line of mask wearing is absolutely beyond my comprehension. I don't know why they won't let this go. We've got science to show us the kids are the least vulnerable, most kids, the vast majority of kids. And if we're going to sit around and try to come up with zero risk policies for danger in schools, we're going to be doing stuff and handcuffing, putting on these policies, these strict policies in all kinds of ways. I can tell you that at my own kids' school, they stopped being allowed to climb on certain monkey bars because someone hurt their wrist. They stopped being allowed to play football at halftime because someone got hurt. They weren't hurt and sent to the hospital. They were just hurt. So you keep putting up these, ways to bubble wrap our kids. And in this case, yes, I understand that it's a pandemic, but we've got the data now. We have the science that everyone claims we should be directing our decisions, and yet they just won't let this go with the kids in school. And I'm baffled and I'm angry.
Michele Tafoya with us right now. Michele, as I understand it, you guest hosted on The View. Wondering how that was as an experience, and if you could find out where I am on the short list to maybe guest host at some point, because I feel like those ladies and I would have a lot to talk about.
I think you would. I think you should volunteer yourself if you're not on that short list. They ought to get to know you. It was a really interesting experience that taught me a lot about myself and my ability to stand up for the things that I believe in. Look, you're talking with 4 women who really don't share your opinion if you're a conservative. And not only that, the entire audience is with them. So you're on a little island there. And it's not that they're I don't want to make it sound like they're bullying or attacking, but your opinions you're very much your own. And so you've got to be ready for that. And honestly, that's what's been pulling me to make a move in my career, is that I have too many friends who are quote unquote afraid or scared to talk about their beliefs and their values because of what risk they're taking. This is amazing to me that I've got friends who are scared to say things or post things on Facebook for fear of the repercussions. That ain't America.
I think that's the vast majority of Americans right now, Michele. And I think you will find, as Buck and I have found, the number one thing that people say to me, irrespective of all the opinions we share, is, I'm so glad I listened to your show because you guys have conversations and say things that I'm afraid to actually attach my name to. And
yeah.
How terrifying is that in America where many people feel like that? I think the vast majority, whether you're white, black, Asian, Hispanic, Democrat, Republican, Independent, I think there's a stultifying fear that has taken over, much of it connected to social media.
That's where it's got to be up to people like us. I don't mean to sound dramatic about this, but I'm tired of being scared and seeing people scared. This is not a way to live, and this is not a way to have a civil society and a free society. This ain't it. Being scared of backlash on social media, this is not it. So I'm kind of like on this crusade to cut through the fear and let people know they have an ally. And I'm just not afraid anymore. I've been through the ringer on Twitter and Instagram and all the rest, and I lived to talk about it. And you know what? There are a lot worse things in life than some stranger hating you. So if some stranger on Twitter wants to, put me through a written beat down, they can do that. I can choose to let that affect me, or I can choose to say, whatever, I don't know that person.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you do know the person, it's a little startling because you find out your values are much different than you thought. So that's where I understand it gets dicey. But we've got to have these conversations. And if people are afraid to have them, then guys like you, people like me, we've got to have them for them, like on their behalf.
Michele, it may come as a shock to our listeners, but turns out there are some random strangers on the internet who like neither me nor Clay. It is a thing which we still we're like, how is this possible? We're such
My mom
nice,
is stunned that it could ever
nice
happen.
fellows, and what's with all the all caps and the words I can't read on the radio? But anyway, Michele Tafoya, where should folks go to follow your work or what you're up to next? Follow you on Twitter?
You know what? No, I'm not on social media for that reason. Yeah, I'm off of it for now, and I'm on LinkedIn. That's where you can find me, just because that's kind of the least abrasive place I've found to post.
People are polite on LinkedIn. It's kind of like you feel like the HR department is watching you when you're writing on LinkedIn, so it's a little different.
So, but you know what? That's okay. And I've had some pushback, but for the most part, that's where you can find me, at least for now. We'll see if that changes. I don't know.
All right, Michele Tafoya. Michele, thanks so much for joining us on Clay and Buck. We appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys. Take care.